Hey there, it's Kyle talking about tourist traps, and they are as they sound. They're places that promise you riches of excitement and then leave you wishing you spent your time and money elsewhere. But in this video, I'm going to talk about 10 tourist traps that are actually worth visiting. There are two types of tourist traps that I'll be discussing in this video. The first are the roadside ones. You'll see a bunch of billboards for these along the interstate. And the other ones are certain parts of cities where tourists go to. So every big city that has a lot of tourists has that certain part of town where it's almost entirely tourists going there. So in this video, I'll be mentioning several of each of these. If there are any tourist traps that I didn't mention in this video that you think are worth visiting, let me know in the comment section. But yeah, let's get started with this list. The first is the Meteor Crater in Arizona, and it's not very far from Interstate 40 as you drive across the stage, and I do think it's really cool and worth seeing. And it's really hard to give it justice from the photos, but it is just a giant hole in the ground. And when you see it in person, you're like, wow, something this big hit the earth. And yeah, something this big hit the earth. There really isn't a whole lot to see or do there. There's a little visitor center with some little displays. And basically what you do is just kind of walk around the impact crater, which is pretty impressive. But there isn't a whole lot else you're going to do there. You might spend maybe 2 hours there tops. I didn't even mention the Meteor Crater in my video about road tripping in the Four Corners area. And I almost did, but the only negative with this attraction, it is kind of expensive. It's $18 per adult and $9 per kid. So, a family of four is going to pay, $54 to visit it. So it can be kind of expensive for somewhere you're going to only spend a couple hours at. But, where else are you going to see a giant impact crater? But here, there's literally nowhere else in the U.S. you're going to see it. So I do think it's worth it, even though it's kind of expensive. The second is the Pike Public Market in Seattle, and you've seen video of this a million times on travel shows and stuff, and it's most well known. It's a place where the dudes throw a fish, and if you buy a fish, they'll throw one to you if you want to do that. And of course, you have a big seafood market there, so if you're interested in some fresh seafood, it's the best place to go. But it's also pretty well known for its large flower market, so if you're interested in that, there's a lot of cool stuff there. There's also a lot of cool food vendors and other types of vendors that aren't selling seafood or flowers, so I think it is worth checking out, even though it is almost entirely tourist visiting. Every big city has a public market like this, and the one in Seattle is one of the best ones in the country, so don't not visit it thinking it's going to be just a giant tourist trap. I mean, it kind of is, but it is also worth seeing if you've never been to Seattle. Similarly, another tourist trap worth visiting is Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, and I know the locals really deride this place, don't go there, it's a giant tourist trap, and well, it is, but I do think it's worth visiting. There are several reasons why I recommend visiting Fisherman's Wharf. The first is that if you haven't been to the West Coast, then you've probably never seen sea lions, and you're pretty much guaranteed to see them sitting off the pier there, and it's a pretty cool sight to see if you've never seen that. The second is that Fisherman's Wharf is the launching pad for any cruises out in the bay, so if you're interested in taking a cruise under the Golden Gate Bridge or over to Sausalito or to Alcatraz, the boats are going to start leaving from Fisherman's Wharf. And the third is that there are some genuinely cool shops in the area. And, I'm left-handed. I remember when I was a little kid, I'd go to Pier 39. There's a left-handed store there. I was like, oh, this is so cool. There's a store for people like me. And, there are some pretty neat shops on Pier 39. But again, it is just a big tourist trap. The main road that goes through the area is super kitschy. There's a lot of street performers, but I think the street performers in the Fisherman's Wharf area are the most talented street performers in the country. But there is a lot of just trashy stuff on that area as well. But overall, I do think Fisherman's Wharf is worth seeing. I've been to San Francisco a million times. It's not somewhere I go anymore, but if you've never been there, do make sure you see it. If you're only going to be there for a short period of time, don't only see Fisherman's Wharf, but if you're going to be there for 2-3 days or so, definitely take the time to see the wharf area, even though, again, it is a giant tourist trap. The fourth one I'm going to mention isn't really a tourist trap per se, but it is worth discussing. That's called Russell's Travel Center in eastern New Mexico, and it's literally just a gas station and travel center off of I-40. But why I recommend stopping there is once you go in there, it's more than just a travel center. There's also a classic car museum. So I'm not sure why, but there's a huge collection of classic cars and lots of really cool ones as well. A lot of 50s and 60s memorabilia on the walls and some stuff that, sells stuff like that as well. So when we first went there, we were like, what is this? We ended up spending a lot more time there than we expected. So if you're on a road trip, you're probably budgeting a certain amount of time for, stops for gas, but do budget a little more time for this stop, especially if you're into old cars, because you really might find yourself spending a half an hour or more at Russell's Travel Center in eastern New Mexico. The fifth one I'm going to mention is Niagara Falls, and there are two aspects to visiting Niagara Falls. One is the actual physical attraction itself, and it is fantastic. It's one of the most impressive waterfalls in the world, and certainly something you're going to want to see. But the other side of visiting Niagara Falls is the city itself, which is just a giant tourist trap. It's really kitschy, really cheesy, just a train wreck of kitsch. And as an American, one thing that's pretty cool is that it's the only place on the US-Canada border where the Canadian side is worse. All that cheesy tourist stuff is on the Canadian side. But again, don't not visit Niagara Falls because it is so cheesy and touristy. Don't let it detract from the actual waterfall itself, which is gorgeous and something you're certainly going to want to see. The sixth one I'll mention is the world's largest buffalo in Jamestown, North Dakota. And I'm not really big on these world's largest things you'll see signs for off the interstate, but there are several reasons why I think this one is worth stopping at. The first, that it's right off the interstate, so you don't have to go way out of the way, so it'll take you really less than 5 minutes to even get to it. The second is that there's kind of a small frontier village with some old, buildings there. It's not nothing spectacular, but the kids might like it, and again, it is right off the interstate and it's free. There is a small museum there that isn't free, but it does go to a good cause. It's good for buffalo conservation, the people that really are into buffalo and bison research. And there's a chance you'll see a small bison herd and possibly even a white buffalo, but the chances are pretty slim of seeing them. But the reasons why the chances are slim are actually a good reason, because they have 200 acres of land to roam around. So these aren't kept in a small pen, like some of those sketchy roadside zoos where people can go up and pet the animals. These are pretty good people, so you'll only have a chance to see them if they happen to be near the buildings themselves. And then there's the world's largest buffalo itself. You can take your picture with it. It's pretty cheesy, but if you're going to stop there, obviously get a picture of the world's largest buffalo, Jamestown, North Dakota. The seventh one on this list is the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. And there are a few reasons why I think this one's worth visiting. The first, that it's not very far from the interstate. It's only a couple of miles, so you don't have to go way far out of the way to see it. And it's a pretty cool site. Everything on the outside of it is made out of corn. So you have these pretty cool murals that change each year depending on the theme of the year. And it's a pretty cool thing to see. It's free to go inside. It's just kind of a cheesy shop. There's some corn related stuff. It's mostly made in China kind of stuff. But, it is kind of interesting to see all this kind of cheesy kitsch. And it's interesting enough, it's also a basketball court. So during the winter, when there aren't many tourists going through there, this is where the local high school basketball team plays. And another reason why I think it's worth stopping at is that when you're driving across South Dakota on I-90, it's a really boring drive going across Minnesota and eastern South Dakota. So you'll probably want a spot to stretch your legs. And so again, you can just go a couple of miles off the interstate, see a pretty funky tourist attraction that's completely free, and stretch your legs a little bit. The eighth tourist trap that I think is worth seeing is the Fort Worth Stockyards. And this is just an area where you got some shops, and it's kind of some Texas kitsch kind of stuff, but there are some pretty cool shops there as well. You got a cattle drive that goes on there. It's not the most realistic cattle drive in the world. The cows look like they just really don't want to be there, because they probably don't, but it is kind of a cool, slice of Texas to see. And if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I think Dallas is kind of one of the most boring big cities to visit. There isn't really a whole lot to do if you're a tourist, but I think Fort Worth is much more interesting, and the Stockyards are a pretty cool sight to see. It's very Texas, even though it is kind of a tourist trap. But just like Fisherman's Wharf, there are some genuinely cool shops there. You can get some really nice boots, some good hats, and you can also get some really cheesy shot glasses too. But there are some pretty cool things to see. So I do think it's worth stopping at the Fort Worth Stockyards. The ninth one I'm going to mention is Old Sacramento, and this is right next to downtown, right along the Sacramento River. It's pretty well preserved. The buildings are in pretty good shape. You got the wooden planked sidewalk kind of thing, and you got the cheesy carriage rides, and there are some pretty interesting shops and things there. The food there isn't very good. Really no good restaurants there, but you can take the paddle wheel boat rides, and one thing that's really cool about it is the train museum. So whether you're into trains or not, this is a really nice museum. I do strongly recommend visiting there. It is a very touristy part of town, but I do think it's worth seeing because it's one of the best preserved Old West areas in the country. And let's get real here. Sacramento is the single most important city on the planet because that's where I was born. So that alone makes it the most important city on the surface of planet Earth. But, if you're in Sacramento, make sure you do stop to see Old Sacramento. And the last one I'm going to mention is the granddaddy of all tourist traps in the U.S., probably in the world even. That's Times Square, New York City. We've all seen Times Square so many times on TV and movies. It's almost like we're super familiar with it, the ball dropping New Year's kind of stuff. And, every movie that takes place in New York, at some point, they're in Times Square. And I think a lot of folks that haven't been to New York don't realize that Times Square is the tourist trap part of the city. And it is. It's pretty much all tourists there. A lot of just cheesy stuff going on. You got some really annoying street performers that aren't like the ones in Fisherman's Wharf that are actually talented. The ones in New York tend to be people dressed up in costumes that'll charge you $10 to take a picture with them. So, again, it is very cheesy, but it is a slice of New York that you've seen a million times. And if you're going to go to New York, you have to see Times Square, even though it is just a giant tourist trap. So there's my list of 10 tourist traps in the U.S. worth seeing. And I could do a list of 100 ones that are not worth seeing, but I do think these are pretty cool. And if you're going to be road tripping some of these roadside ones where we're stopping in, if you're going to be visiting some of these big cities, don't not visit these touristy parts of town thinking this is going to be totally cheesy. It is, but it's also a pretty good experience as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know that you approve. And if you're interested in other stuff about traveling in the U.S., cross-country road tripping, just some kind of nerdy geography stuff, subscribe to the channel. That's kind of stuff that I'm posting. But yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King signing out and about to go see Rock City.